Okay, so last time on Gran Turismo 4, we did the Europe Classic Car Championship, and I was able to win 4 out of 5 races in that championship using my Alfa Romeo Spider 1600 Duato. And now, I think it's time for us to move on now to the Euro Hot Hatch League. And this next one, to me, is going to be very interesting in terms of what choices I can use for this event, because, well, in all honesty, this event is strictly limited to cars that classify as hot hatches. And I have tried to see if I can mosey my way through the rules by upgrading one of my cars to put out similar horsepower outputs to the hot hatches, but unfortunately, as I came to discover, the game basically thwarted my plans. So this is probably one of, I think, very few events in this game that I think is actually fucking with me in terms of the choices I have, because they're just so limited. Now, because I've already used most of the recommended manufacturers up to this point that are required to enter our next event, I'm simply just going to head over to Peugeot because I've not driven a Peugeot yet. And I think what I'm going to drive for this, because I want to be absolutely sure I get clearance to this event, I'm going to drive this, the Peugeot 206 RC, one of the permittable cars on the list, and I'm going to make damn sure that this time I get my way into this event, because last time I paid a pretty heavy price for it when I couldn't get in, so that's why I'm buying this thing. And I'm also buying it in blue as well, because, well, I want to. So we're now switching over to the Peugeot 206 RC from 2003, a car that's hopefully guaranteed to get me into this next event. And if it isn't, then, well, I don't know what else to say other than blatantly saying that, and this is probably the only time you're going to hear me say this, but I honestly think this event, if the game does not allow me to enter the event using this car, the event restrictions, they can literally go fuck themselves. That's the only time you'll hear me say that. Everything else in this game, I'm fine with. It's just, there are certain quirks regarding entry restrictions that just happen to be more frustrating than others. That's all it is. Nothing outside of that, it's just this one event that's basically got my ass, honestly, pinned to the wall. And as ever, I usually don't like it when my choices to enter an event are very limited. And also putting on stage 1 weight reduction for good measure. And, well, I better do the sports suspension as well. I'll probably get the other bits of balancing fitted to this thing, because I think I'll need those. So I'm going to put this on first, port polish, and then afterwards I'll put on the engine balancing. And then hopefully that should be enough for me to compete for outright wins in this championship. And in case if that isn't enough, well, I'll get some more parts and pieces fitted. So, unfortunately, we cannot do the carbon drive shaft, but what we can do is fit the triple clutch, and that's what I'm doing now. And yes, I am keeping this at normal speed because, well, I already used up my cue the music cues earlier on. But anyway, there we go. I think we've got all the tuning on this thing that we need, so let's see how we go. As we have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 events to go in Europe. However, the 1000 miles tournament, that's not coming till later on, when I can manage to get everything else sorted out. So this is the Euro Hot Hatch League, and where, yes, I am literally using one of the aforementioned cars permitted to enter the event. And aside from that, we also got Alfa Romeo, Renault, Mini, and Volkswagen among the entry manufacturers. Again, my choices for this event are very limited, and I want to make damn sure I have entry to this. And this time I do. So we're heading to Twin Ring Motegi East, Opera Paris, Trial Mountain, Suzuka Circuit East is this? Yeah, Suzuka East, and Special Stage Route 5. And now, after spending almost 7 minutes rambling, let's actually go racing. And one other thing about this field is, we've got 2 cars in this event that we are not allowed to use as the player, and those include the Ford Focus RS and the BMW M Coupe. Both cars which, for some reason, are not allowed to be entered by the player. And well, partly because, well, the Ford Focus RS, even though it is a European hot hatch, it's technically American because, well, Ford is American. And also, I have no idea why the BMW is not a permissible entry for this event, but again, the restrictions for this event are practically so tight that the choices you actually have to enter the event are honestly very hard to determine over whether or not you can enter or not. But let's see how we go. Hopefully the work I've done to this thing will be enough to at least give it a fighting chance. And I think it will get a fighting chance, because the points we score for this event are only 42. And yes, I did make sure to fit a turbocharger to this thing, so I could at least have a shot at going for a clean sweep. That's partly my reason for doing this, of course. And also because, well, up until this point of the game, I have not driven a Peugeot. Okay, third gear is probably the best gear for me to be in order to avoid wheel spin through the corners. Even though it still happens anyway, but hopefully the parts and pieces I have on this thing can make up for that. So, 3.8 seconds ahead is the Golf R32. Since I've already used a Golf up to this point in the game, I figured I might as well use the Peugeot instead, because I know the Peugeot is one car that I have not used. And now passing the Mini on the inside, and now trying to chase after the 147 GTA. The Golf R32 still leads, but he won't be leading for long, and keeping this thing in third gear so I don't get any wheel spin off the corner. It's probably the best approach I can take since this car is, again, front wheel drive, which means there's going to be plenty of understeer, damn it. I was really hoping that wheel spin wouldn't happen. Oh well. Anyways, up the inside, I've now taken the lead for the first time, and boy, I'm hoping it can stay that way. As long as the BMW stays behind us, then I think we should be okay. Because the BMW M Coupe is probably the most powerful car in the field aside from me. And that's why I'm hoping he stays behind the pack long enough for me to just slip away from the AI. And there's the understeer kicking in once again, as my car did not want to fully respond to going into the corner for some reason. But either way, it's okay, because I very much have a strongly fitted turbo to help me mosey away from the field. Since I figured this time around at least, I wanted to be absolutely sure that I was going to have a shot of winning all the races. And the one thing that I think is even more intriguing about this event is that when I did the research, I'm convinced in saying, and it's not the game, it's just this event, but I am convinced in saying that this event, for want of a better phrase, by the time we get our prize car, it'll basically be just this event that's fucking with me. In other words, it'll be this event that'll basically screw me over in terms of the prize car we get. And I will go into that in further detail, as you will find out by the time this championship is done. But again, the reason I didn't speed up the tuning queue this time as well, because I wanted to be absolutely sure that this car was permissible for this event. Basically granted access to enter the event. Especially since with my other two plans, my access was so clearly denied that I honestly felt like the entry restrictions basically rubbed it in my face. Again, as I said before, it's not to say this game is bad. It's just with this one event that I think with its entry restrictions fucks with me. That's all it is. And almost everyone finished before the points were displayed. Although I'm pretty sure everyone finished by now. So P1 to me and my 206, P2 to the Mini, and P3 to the Ford Focus RS. So that's our first race, and 12 grand is ours. That's quite a lot compared to most of the races we've done up to this point. But anyway, those are your points. And now let's move on to Opera Paris for race 2. And so here we are for race 2 in Opera Paris. and where I think things are going to get a bit more interesting this time because, well, compared to Motegi, which was essentially a racetrack based on speed above most things, this is a city course that is largely based on cornering. And I think it's fair to say this might be where I reckon the AI could get an advantage over me. But either way, I did keep all my tuning essentials on this thing, so I could at least have a shot of being able to fight for the win, which is basically what I want to be doing. And yes, again, and the Alfa Romeo is not giving me room to get by. Although it doesn't matter because I basically blitz him on the outside anyway. And now, just gotta figure out how to clear this BMW. And limiting the wheel spin. Gotta be patient with the throttle, okay. A little bit of wheel spin there on that corner exit, but still able to at least get a strong exit. And now passing the BMW as I almost go into the fence there. The BMW tried to force me into the concrete there for a moment, but I wasn't having it. And now I just have to figure out how to get through the rest of this. And again, getting bits of wheel spin from the understeer, which means the car does not want to enter some of these corners. But of course I am trying to correct those errors, and a ton of wheel spin I got from hitting that curb. But either way it's okay, because I'm now closing in on the Ford Focus RS. It was only 6.2 seconds clear of me, so I reckon this American boy, well, British boy realistically, because, well, this car was technically made for the European market. And I think it was, what, Ford of Britain that made this a European car? Because I'm pretty sure the Ford Focus RS was made in Britain, if I recall correctly, like the Ford RS 200 was. Oh, shit, okay. Yep, I got a lot of understeer through that left-hander. That's about as close as I can dare get to the wall with this thing. With the copious amounts of understeer I have still in the car. But either way, I'm still closing in on the Focus. I figured this was going to be where the racing would get more interesting, and now as a result, I am just 1.7 seconds behind him, so I probably gained less than a second on that previous lap, and it looks like it's either going to be this lap or the next lap where I pass him. I figured the first race at Motegi was probably going to be a dud in terms of difficulty, because, well, I won that race pretty easily. But because we have more corners here, it's fair to say the agile capabilities of the Ford Focus RS, they've been challenging me for a bit longer this time around. Basically, Motegi was just a taster for what I believe is to come for the rest of this championship. Especially since I know I have dealt with some pretty tricky races up to this point that I have managed to overcome. And well, The Focus is also getting plenty of understeer as well, because he's also running wide through that, that left-hander. It's basically just a left-hand flick, where basically only very few cars can honestly dare to go flat out. That's about as in control with understeer as I could possibly get. Also, yes, I did have to force my way past the Focus, because that was probably about as close as I could dare. I think he just had a moment of understeer there once I passed him, because I noticed he twitched. So I'm going to assume that must have been a moment of understeer, and he had to step on the brakes to course correct the car's position. There is a way to drive in these cars, but the thing is, with front wheel drive cars, especially when they have upgrades on, you do have to be delicate with the throttle without traction control in order to basically get through the corners without there being any real issues depending on the corners you go through. It also depends on knowing if the car will compensate for the track surface. Which is the other thing I've noticed. And off the final corner, going steady with my throttle input, and across the line as I went with a 140.5. Had I kept my foot in the gas for longer, I probably could have achieved a 140.2 if I really wanted to, but doesn't matter because, well, I still won in the end. So now it's the Ford Focus RS, who I think moves up into second because, well, he did finish on the podium last time. So this is basically a case of France versus Britain in this championship. However, I have drawn first blood in the first two races. And then at the back we've got the Alfa Romeo with the Mini Cooper S. And another 12 grand is ours. So altogether, if we manage to get a sweep of this, we'll get a total of 105,000 credits, mathematically. Which I think, compared to most events up to this point, is rather extraordinary. But either way, it's pretty much what I chose to do. And I'm not going to waste any time, we're just going to go racing. And it's another grid start, so and still getting some understeer off the launch, but I think that's okay because I did at least manage to limit the damage with the wheel spin because of the understeer that I got from the front tyres. And now already up into third position. The BMW has now taken the lead for the first time, as I would have expected him to at some point, because the BMW is technically the most powerful car here. Even though, for some inexplicable reason, the player is not allowed to use the BMW. But doesn't really seem to matter because, well, I do have pace, both in the corners and on the straightaways. And it is fair to say that since I did put on some mandatory upgrades to make sure this would work, I'm convinced in saying that we have everything we need in order to pretty much put together just the championship run we basically need to put together. Plus it will also make it easier for me to get through the remaining events if I do get to sweep. And almost drifting into the wall, but it's okay because I have managed to keep it off the wall. So 3.3 seconds is now the gap. I pretty much have my car secured in all areas for where it needs to be good. And as I get through the hairpin, it looks as though this is going to be another race where I come away with what's looking likely to be another easy win. And well, considering the struggles I've had recently with some of these races, I'm basically just going to keep the parts and pieces I have fitted on this thing, because I'm convinced in saying I will need them in order to get the sweep. That's basically what my objective is here. To basically limit the costs I have put on this thing in terms of upgrades, and also making sure that, if it's possible, I have managed to give myself not only an applicable entry, but a winning entry as well, which is partly the reason why I bought this thing in the first place. And also because, well, up to this point, Peugeot is one manufacturer which I have not fielded use of in this game yet until now for race events. Initially, I thought about using the 106, but I decided it was easier for me to use the 206 because then it meant I would have to spend less on upgrades. If you know what I'm talking about, that is. But I am very much looking like I will probably get the clean sweep here. Plus, some of the championships I've done in this game, they have been harder than others. But either way, when you're talking in terms of points, most of these, well, I've either managed to cinch them a race early, or they've basically been cinched well earlier. But either way, I have scored once again, with a 9.587 second margin of victory over the BMW. The Ford Focus RS finished third, followed by the Alfa Romeo, the VW Golf, and the Mini Cooper S. Suffice to say, we are definitely on our way to securing what will probably be another dominant victory altogether. Especially since I now have a 16-point lead up front. And this is with a car that has around about 230 horsepower. As we have now gained, I think, 36 grand precisely since we started this. And you know what? I think I'll save this replay, because I don't have a replay saved yet. This time we are at Trial Mountain. Yeah, that's right. And there we go. Okay, onto the fourth race of the Euro Hot Hatch League. As we are now at Suzuka Circuit East. Another one where we'll be in with a grid start. And this time, shifting up into second gear, just to limit the wheel spin. A little slow off the launch, but that's okay. I had to make sure that I wasn't going to get any oversteer off the launch. Sometimes it's easier not to burn the tyres. Even then, of course, if the tyres are actually quite easy to burn through some of these corners. But either way, I passed the Alfa Romeo from the outside, and now I am looking to see if I can pass both the Ford Focus and the BMW in front of me. As it looks as though the BMW is probably going to be my closest opponent from here on out. Especially since I have established how inconsistent the AI have been up to this point. So I think I'm more or less allowed to pretty much, well, I guess you could say I'm pretty much allowed to coalesce my domination with my upgrades as I get. I think that was a bump from behind by the BMW. I'm going to assume that probably must have been a friendly bump or something, because I was already on the brakes when I made the corner. But either way, it looks like the BMW from here is probably going to take over P2 in the standings, especially since he was only 2 points behind the Ford Focus RS heading into this race. The inconsistency among the AI in these championship events, it's honestly just been unbelievable. But I have found a way, of course, to become the benefactor when the AI fumble. And boy do I know the AI to fumble when it comes to championship situations. But still, championship events in this game, they are relatively easy to get through. And I can definitely say that if this does turn out to be another clean sweep, then I will have almost... certainly benefited from the fact that my car at this point has clearly been the best. And well, because we're on a shorter circuit this time, the gaps aren't quite as big as they were at Trial Mountain. And I have established that the AI have given me quite a few memorable battles at the full Suzuka circuit, depending on which car it is I use, as in the AI have come quite close to beating me, but on most occasions they haven't, because I've always managed to fight back, given enough time. I think it's fair to say this car is definitely an FF in terms of the drivetrain it has, because this car is clearly front wheel drive, judging by the tyre degradation or tyre damage, as they call it in the GT series. So through the S-bends one more time around. And it looks as though we are once again on our way to what's essentially another race of domination. Not exactly annihilation, but definitely domination, because of how good my car has been. And there we go, 4 out of 4. And precisely 168 points scored altogether in terms of A-spec points. And now the Golf has dropped to the rear of the field. I think this is where the BMW takes over second. Even though he is now tied, of course, with the Ford Focus for that position. So I am more than double the points of everyone else in this championship. And it looks as though the Mini Cooper S will probably finish in last. But either way, it was nice for him to get P4. So it is fair to say that further back there is still something to battle for. But either way, there we go. Now it's time for the final race. So we have just one race to go in this championship, and it takes place at Special Stage Route 5, Reverse. I pretty much know my way around this track relatively well, and I'm also pretty sure that since I don't really need to make any changes on the car, this should be an easy win for me, all things considered. Because I haven't really changed anything on the car prior to us starting the event. And well, it was just becoming a lot easier for me to simply just keep the upgrades I got for this thing fitted as the Golf tries to punt me out the way, but he is not gonna get anything working for him, as I am well clear now of the Golf R32. And that's a wall. Although the oversteer is ever prevalent here in these events. And still getting understeer through some of these corners, but at least I'm able to manage it, which is one thing I probably wouldn't have been able to say had I not chosen this thing. Plus it's also because, well, at some point I'm inevitably going to wind up using a Mini, so I figured I might as well get my lack of driving Peugeots up to this point pretty much out of the way. I also don't think my rally car could have entered this event either, because, as I said before, while the restrictions, they're quite tight, and the only way to realistically enter this event is if you do it with an actual hot hatch, which is basically what I wound up choosing here, as both the Ford Focus RS and the BMW are battling for second position in the championship. I pretty much got this championship cinched in the third race because of just how far ahead I was. But then it was obviously with me winning the penultimate race that I basically cinched it regardless of what happens next. And as I would have figured, this race is definitely more of a challenge compared to the previous four, because the AI are definitely battling me here for the race win. And I think it's ironic to say that once again it takes us all the way up to the last race, and probably the last lap as well, for me to realistically get the overtake done on the leader in order for me to quite simply clinch the clean sweep. The AI usually do tend to be more competitive here at SSR5, but I can definitely say this race, so far at least, has been a challenge. And in all honesty, I do like a good challenge. Even though one thing that does not necessarily sit well with me about this game, and I really am sorry to say this, but it was this game that basically debuted the whole catch the rabbit thing with the rolling starts. And that's basically a thing which has more or less remained in the series ever since. It just doesn't sit well with me, in all honesty. I could be wrong about the whole thing, but the whole catch the rabbit thing, where the player basically starts from the back in single race events and then has to work his way up to the front. Compared to the games prior to this, where most of the races were basically started with the grid start formation, it just doesn't really sit right with me, in all honesty, and I'm probably not the only one who feels that way. But either way, doesn't matter to anyone else, because I got the sweep of the Euro Hot Hatch League over both the BMW M Coupe and the Ford Focus RS. Hey, everyone finished the race. Gotta say, I clearly made all the right calls for this championship, and I figured the tuning was absolutely needed in order for me to well and truly cinch this, and that's what I did. So the BMW resolves the tiebreaker between he and the Focus, as the Focus comes home third, and let's go through the rest of the points now, as the Mini Cooper once again finished towards the back. I think it was P5 in this race. Anyway, so First and foremost, we get another 12 grand, which has now increased our total by 60 grand altogether, and 45,000 for winning the championship overall. That now increases my money to 815,000. So these are the final point standings. So a clean sweep to me and my 206 road car. I believe that's what RC is short for. Then the BMW finished second with 24 points after coming on strong in the last 3 races. Then the Focus came home third. The Golf finished fourth. The Alfa Romeo came home fifth. And then at the back it was the Mini Cooper S. So 50, 24, 22, 13, 12 and 9 are the final points totals of each of our opponents, rounded off with the Mini Cooper S. Okay, let's move on. Now, in terms of the prize for this event really knows how to fuck with me. And the reason for that as well, because the prize we get here is a car that we've already bought. The Volvo 240 GLT Estate, which unfortunately is a car that I already bought, and well, for probably the first and only time in this game, I will have to sell this thing, because I already have another one in red, and I've committed my pledge to using the red Volvo 240. So, it's kind of annoying because I already bought the car, and because I have committed to that car, I will have to sell the other one, because I don't really care for the other one personally, but that's just me. This is not anyone else's opinion but mine. I want to be perfectly clear on that. So, I think we'll do the Pan-Euro Championship next. And then after that, we'll probably get through the DTM Championship, and then we'll probably finish off the main championship events in Europe with the British GT Series. So 38.3% complete. My win percentage has now moved back up to 85%, and I now have 93 cars in my garage. Unfortunately, however, I will have to sell the other Volvo I have because I've committed to this one and pretty much done all the elbow grease into this thing. So basically, this is more or less the car we get, minus the wheels and the wing I put on the back of this thing when I tried to enter this thing into the event we just did before. You probably won't get it in red, but this is more or less the prize we get, minus the rims I changed and also the wing I fitted to this thing. Okay, Duddy 240, where are you? There you are, Mr. Dud, now I have to sell you. Plus, I'm not really a fan of this beige, personally, but that's just me. Anyway, gonna get rid of you, even though you only sell for 3 grand, but whatever. I'm selling you anyway because I already have one of these. And because I might need the extra money. So, first and only time I'm gonna do that. But anyways, yeah. Volvo 240 GLT Estate is what we get from winning this event. So, now let's move on to the Pan-Euro Championship. Coming up next.